Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of The Running Man, or as I've been calling it lately, The Running Man, starring Glen Powell, directed by Edgar Wright. This is the movie I said it's going to determine whether or not Glen Powell turns into the bankable star that Hollywood wants him to be. And I knew even way back in The Dark Knight Rises, whenever he gets his head smashed by Bane, and I was like, man, that is a guy who knows how to take a hit. He is going to be a star. Nah, I didn't really know him then. But I think to us as just the general public, we see somebody like him who is finally starting to really come into focus. We're starting to see him everywhere. And we just see that success. We think overnight he has just become a star. But he's been around for so long. And I think this is now his big leading role that is going to determine whether or not he is going to be that next leading man in Hollywood. Some people are queuing him up to be the next Tom Cruise because I think he is as versatile as a Tom Cruise. But what we have here in The Running Man, it is a remake of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, which I realized just last week I was talking about Predator, which is another franchise tied to Arnold Schwarzenegger. He is really big right now, apparently remaking his movies. Also, this is the second Stephen King adaptation I've seen in theaters this year. And I think both of those things are going to play into how I ended up feeling about this movie, because I thought this was going to be an instant top at least 15 for me, because I like Glen Powell. I love Edgar Wright, who has directed movies like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Baby Driver, has a really unique style that blends almost this hyper realism, great action. Although it feels like it's set in our world, it also feels like it's set in an entirely different universe that is very Edgar Wright. And I really enjoy his style. I think he is a great director. But I just found myself saying, why now? Why make this movie now? What are you trying to say? But what the movie is about, it takes place in the near future. Glen Powell plays a character named Ben Richards who is down on his luck. It starts out, you find out about his family. He has a kid who is really sick. And in this world, it is really hard for anybody to get medicine. And the poor are the poorest of the poor, and the rich are the richest of the rich. And the kind of last-ditch effort a lot of people who are struggling have to make money is to go on TV and compete in these different types of game shows that are really meant to humiliate the poor, and in turn also put your life on the line just to make enough money to survive. And Ben Richards is in a place where he can't work. So this is the only way that he can earn money to save his daughter and also have money to give back to his wife. So he is a really angry guy, which I think was hard for me to really place Glen Powell as an angry guy. The problem I had settling into this movie at the beginning is it felt like his story was really just kind of thrust upon us, where you're supposed to feel instantly sad for him, because how could you not feel bad for a guy with a sick kid just trying to provide for his family? But I feel like it really failed on making me feel emotional early on in the movie, which eventually, as all the action unfolded, really kept me from connecting to Ben Richards as a person. But once we got into the actual action of the movie, once he is convinced by the evil villain Josh Brolin to compete in these games by telling him, I think you have what it takes, because in the entire run of this show, nobody has made it till the end, survived 30 days while being hunted by these assassins, where also all the citizens of the world can report you. So that is what you're trying to do. You're trying to outrun all the citizens from reporting you and survive the assassins who have been sent out to kill you. And you basically learn the rules of the game. You have to keep running, and you also have to document yourself for at least a brief period every day to prove that you are alive. So you have to send back these tapes, and that is kind of the overview of the game and really all you need to know. But I found myself just really struggling to understand who Ben Richards was. And I think that, combined with me really only being able to see Glen Powell as a likable guy, and as Josh Brolin is telling his character that he is the most ruthless guy and meanest guy he's ever met, I just couldn't really see that in him. And that really kept me from enjoying the overall arc of his character. And while I don't think he did a bad job at portraying that, I just think maybe he was a little bit miscast in this movie overall. Because when I look around at the entire cast, Josh Brolin obviously is a fantastic villain. Thanos himself just comes down and crushes any role where he has to be a jerk. He is just really good at it. And surprisingly, sometimes when an actor plays a role or a jerk so well, I find myself not being able to be a fan of that person as a human. But for some reason, I just really root for Josh Brolin, his entire story of being an actor who has just put in the work at times, not even making enough money to survive. Whenever he did No Country for Old Men, he had very little money to his name, and that movie really just allowed him to keep going as an actor. To think that is the point he was at in 2007, and now has been in two of the biggest movies of the year, The Running Man and Weapons. I just really root for him, and despite him at times playing characters that I don't like and don't identify with whatsoever, I constantly root for Josh Brolin and have no trouble liking him as a person and not letting his characters affect me. With some other people who play villains, I find myself unfairly hating them, even though them as people haven't really done anything. It's a weird psychological thing by how you see certain people. And even on the other end, you can see somebody playing a superhero or always playing likable people that are probably awful off camera. But Josh Brolin is somebody who, anytime he is in a movie, he always brings it up a level. Another actor like that in this movie is Colman Domingo, who also can elevate a movie just with his presence. Just his voice alone soothes something in my soul, and he always gives a great performance, and his character in this movie was really over the top, and I thought he settled into that really well. Where this movie really lacked for me, I just thought it was going to have a little bit more action. For a movie that ran over 2 hours, I never felt fully engaged in the story. By the end of it, I thought this wasn't the greatest theater experience I've had this year. But if I would have watched this movie first on an airplane or in a hotel room on vacation, I would have loved it. Because this movie really maxed out and stalled in about the second act. And the third act was just kind of a mess for me. So it was still entertaining. It got me to the end, but it really had trouble getting over that last hurdle to become a movie that was worthy of a remake. It felt like it was just the Arnold Schwarzenegger version that got a little bit of a facelift with the CGI, and some of the character design overall just looked better. But I don't really know why this movie was necessary in the end. I also think, just compared to the other Stephen King adaptation I've seen this year, The Long Walk just had so much more emotion, and I feel like these two stories kind of said the same thing. And I think at the end of it, unfairly, I've just been watching a lot of things like this recently that all kind of have to do with a similar subject matter. You have a dystopian future where most of the citizens are poor, and you have this government who oversees everybody, who is trying to keep the poor poor, and they really only give them this little glimmer of hope by making them do something crazy. In The Long Walk, it was going on this competition where the last person standing gets to make one wish, but that is the only shot you have to make money and be successful and have all those things that you don't have right now. I felt like it was the same thing in The Running Man, where the only reason he competes in these deadly games and risks losing his life to not be there for his family was just so they would have a shot at survival. I felt like both of these movies were saying the exact same thing. And the weird thing is, if I'm describing this movie to somebody, I'm like, it's just like The Hunger Games in different situations. But both of these stories came way before The Hunger Games, being movies that came out decades before those books would ever see the light of day. So it is interesting to see how much The Hunger Games actually stole from Stephen King concepts and Stephen King stories. I just feel like The Hunger Games has done those the best. And that has been the best representation of people fighting in games and competing in games in order to win big prizes. But I could not help thinking while watching The Running Man, why is Glen Powell not in the MCU? Because he really flexed his athletic ability in The Running Man, doing a lot of the stunts on his own. Obviously has the physical attributes that you need for a role in the MCU. In this movie, you get a full Glen Powell butt, and you see him running around in basically nothing. Has one of the strongest jawlines in Hollywood right now. And just by looking at that jawline, I thought, man, Glen Powell would look fantastic as Cyclops. Can we cast him in the post-Secret Wars upcoming X-Men movie? And I want a comic book accurate Cyclops suit. I'm talking the full bright blue and yellow with the belt, the full thing. I could just see his face in that suit. To me, my X-Men, I would die for Glen Powell in an X-Men movie as Cyclops, and then also give me the solo Cyclops movie I think we've been deserving now for over 20 years. I'm sorry, James Marsden. I know you're coming back in the new Avengers movies, but I think we need a new Cyclops, and it could quite possibly be Glen Powell. And maybe he's taken the Leonardo advice of not doing superhero movies, even though he has been in one already, had a small role in it. And I could see why an actor of his caliber would not want to be typecast into one of those roles. Say he does become a Cyclops, and suddenly that is what people associate him for. It's going to be harder for him to step outside of roles that aren't in the MCU world, which I think is something that actors like Chris Hemsworth, even Chris Evans, are struggling with a bit right now. So he is expanding his filmography right now to not be typecast in any way. But man, that was a thing I could not help but seeing while watching this movie. In the end, this movie had all the ingredients to make a really great product, but something just fell flat in there. I haven't fully loved an Edgar Wright movie since Baby Driver, and maybe I'm just hoping for something with that level of intensity and his style. For The Running Man, I give it 3.5 out of 5 jumpsuits.